We can learn lessons about life through everyday experiences by reading or by playing board games.
On this podcast, we're going to talk about Monopoly, Robert Kiyosaki's board game CashFlow, and a board game from the 1950s that you may or may not have heard of.
Before we get started, let's have a little trivia. Does anyone know what the game Monopoly was called before it was called Monopoly? Elizabeth Magie, in 1904, designed a board game called The Landlord's Game, and her whole purpose in designing that game was to teach people how monopolies are devastating to the economy. But it wasn't until 1933 when Charles Darwin picked up the game, developed it, and sold it to Parker Brothers, who then published it in 1935 as Monopoly, that it really took off.
There are several different versions of Monopoly that are available today. There's Monopoly all the way from the traditional classic version all the way to versions that are built around movies with all the different special characters. It's quite an array, and it still captures people's imagination as they play this game today.
With the traditional game, I think everyone knows about Boardwalk and Park Place. They want to have those properties because those properties collect the most rent. And if you are lucky enough to land on these properties before anybody purchases them, and you have enough money to purchase them, and by luck, I mean you roll the dice and land on them, then you are sitting good as you go into this game.
But those are only two of the places on the board. And oftentimes, people will march around the board and never land on Boardwalk and Park Place, or very rarely. And so if you're going to win the game of Monopoly, chances are you need more than just Boardwalk and Park Place.
Right. So there's a lot of properties along the way, and there's some very inexpensive properties along the way, which, of course, when people land on them, they don't have to pay as much rent. When you start putting up houses and hotels, it's not as costly for the landlord who owns those properties. And so sometimes people trivialize the purchase of those properties, but they can be a good investment. But everyone likes to focus on the Park Place and Boardwalk because that's where you make the most money. And isn't that true in life? A lot of times there are opportunities for assets that have less of a cost, but less of a return. And so sometimes those aren't as attractive as the big money makers.
It's kind of like Star Wars. Luke Skywalker was the hero in those movies up to a certain point, but most people want to focus today on the dark side. And just like playing Monopoly, most people want to be a Monopoly and monopolize the whole game and win.
That's how you win the game of Monopoly, is by creating a big enough monopoly that you can buy up all the properties, own all the hotels, and you can bankrupt everyone else.
But monopolies are not necessarily good for our economy or good for us. And so sometimes the board games, if we don't have an adult in the picture, can set a wrong precedence for children playing the game, thinking, oh, that's what I need to do is set up a monopoly so I can get rich and wealthy and live happily ever after.
They learn to do this even with their toys and their possessions. I remember having to limit certain amount of times that I allowed my kids to play games such as Monopoly or other sorts of games where they start lording it over their siblings, because that doesn't make for good relationships. In fact, my parents decided early on, before they were married, that they would never play Monopoly again. My mom said she almost broke up with my dad over a Monopoly game. So I'm glad they quit playing because I'm here today.
There's a lot of luck in the game Monopoly, and there is some luck in life as well. Lady Luck only appears to those who are prepared. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not true completely, because there are people that cheat in life, just like there are people that try to cheat in Monopoly. But I remember playing with my brother one long Thanksgiving weekend, and you talk about luck and the roll of the dice. We would switch places after every game across the table from each other. And it so happened that weekend that every time one of the brothers sat on one particular side of the table, they won the game. So Was that luck? Was that the way the dice flew? Was it the position we were sitting at the table? Who knows? But it taught me as a young person that I don't really like to play board games because they don't portray real life.
And it certainly would change your perception as a young child as to which side of the table you need to sit on. And that may or may not be what is leading to success. But how many people see other people that are successful with real estate or successful with a business or in making certain sort of investments, and they attribute the wrong thing to their success? I think that happens often.
Happens all the time. When we play board games like Monopoly, I think there's even a version of Monopoly that is built to promote cheating.
It's like a cheater's Monopoly or something. So I
never played that one, but it doesn't sound like it's instilling great values. But think again about the game Monopoly. How do you win? You win by pushing everyone else out. That's not a good life philosophy, because it's not good for the economy, like you said. It's not even good for our personal spiritual development.
So there again, is the game of Monopoly good? Well, it depends how it's used. It was not good for my parents to play, I can tell you that. But there are some life lessons you can learn. There's things about real estate you can learn. You can learn about asset purchases and timing. If you lose your turn, that you just lost time, and that makes a difference in the market when no one else had to lose their turn. So there's a lot of great lessons that can be learned with Monopoly.
My siblings and I, sometimes we would like to go to jail in Monopoly, because once the board had been built up, the houses and hotels, you could still collect rent, but you didn't have to pay it as you went around the board.
Oh, so it was kind of a safe place.
Exactly. Well, or early on, if you went to jail, it could be a game changer because you weren't out there acquiring properties and building things up. But later on in the game, it wasn't a bad thing to be in jail. And of course, that's not very realistic.
So talking
maybe it is, because there's a lot of prisoners who like to go to jail because they have a place to lay their head, they have food, and they have protection from maybe the outside where people would attack them.
Touché.
So Monopoly is a fun game. It was a fun game to play as a kid. We played it a lot. But sometimes children can come away with the wrong idea by playing Monopoly. But there's a lot of good lessons that can be taught too.
Well, Thanksgiving is coming up, and I wouldn't be surprised if at least 2 people break out the Monopoly board and go at it.
What about the game of CashFlow? That was a game that we brought into our family after we started playing the game Infinite Banking in real life.
Yeah, so you bought this game, Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad game of CashFlow. And I was surprised that you bought the game because, like you said earlier, you really don't like board games. Turns out you don't like them because you don't like to play games with people you love, because you're very competitive. But this game, you bought it because you thought it might help teach us a lesson.
Robert Kiyosaki obviously wrote the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then he designed this game to help children start understanding how the world of finance really works.
And I would say, you say children, but it's also adults. Those of us who are young in our understanding of finances, it's a very helpful learning tool.
He wanted people to understand and become more knowledge about the world of finance, because he said that was what's holding most people back from being able to create more wealth in their life financially. And of course, in this game, it's a board game, and you start out in the rat race like everybody does, most everybody. There's some people that are born with a silver spoon in their mouth.
And you do roll the dice. You move along.
There is an element of luck.
And you go around and around and around in the rat race, doing all the things that we all do every day.
Trying to get enough money and enough passive income to get out of that rat race.
And once you get out of the rat race, you go into another rat race.
It's called the fast track, but it does go around. It's just a bigger circle going around.
And as we played this game, it was very evident to me that there used to be some nostalgia about becoming a millionaire. There are so many millionaires now in the United States and around the world. That's really common. Now to become a billionaire is something, and now we just saw the next level just recently when Elon Musk got $1 trillion payout from Tesla. Now we've got the $1 trillion rat race that started. So these are tiers that just go on. And it brings about the idea that we need to learn to be content. Not ever satisfied with where we're at, because we want to continue to work and be able to create more so that we can help more people and make the world a better place.
We want to be efficient and effective.
There's nothing wrong with going up those tiers of rat races if we're doing it honestly. But when we start cheating, as we know some people do, or defrauding people, that's a whole different situation. That doesn't bring you up in that level, even though you might have more money. It doesn't make the world a better place. And so this is a great game. I don't like to play it anymore because I don't like board games, but it can teach some really good lessons.
I remember playing CashFlow, especially when you first bought it, and it was a lot of fun to play. And the goal of the game of CashFlow is to get out of the rat race and to buy your dream on the fast track. And Robert Kiyosaki says about the game, he says, think of CashFlow as the MBA program for people who want to have fun, learn fast, and get rich.
And what I liked about the game of
game.
CashFlow when we played it is there's actually some math that you have to do and some calculations that you have to do rather than just the roll of the dice.
So when we get back from the break, we're going to bring out another game, that board game from the 1950s that you may or may not have heard about.
This is the Infinite Banking Made Simple binder. Everything you need to know about infinite banking in one spot. And it's a free download. Answers to the top commonly asked questions like what is infinite banking, how does it work, and how much does it cost to get started are answered right here. You'll find the step-by-step diagram starting on page 7 and the investment comparison on page 8. This Infinite Banking Made Simple binder is a free download. You can click the button to get your copy. At McPhee Insurance, we believe infinite banking has become too complicated and confusing, but it shouldn't be. And that's why we created this binder. Infinite banking is simple when you stick to the essentials and the facts. And the people who put it into practice get results. Don't let insurance terms like modified endowment contract, 7-pay test, direct recognition, and paid-up additions keep you from understanding infinite banking. Download the free binder and see how infinite banking can work for you.
This is the 1950s board game that you may or may not have heard about, Careers. And here's what I really like about Careers. Every person gets to choose what their success formula is. So there's 3 different units that you have to collect: money, fame, and happiness. You have to have 60 units of these items, but you can choose to have as much money as you want, as much fame as you want, and as much happiness as you want. So you are creating your success formula for how you'll win this game.
So if I'm really focused on money, I could choose 60 units of money and nothing of fame and happiness.
Well, not exactly, because you have to have at least 1 unit of happiness, at least 1 unit of fame, and then you could have 58 units of money.
Okay. So you get to choose that balance.
Right. And you might choose that as your success formula. Dad over here, if he was playing the board game,
Which he probably isn't.
he might choose to be more balanced and do 20 of each. 20 money, which would be $20,000, 20 units of happiness, and 20 units of fame.
Okay.
And I might choose 10, 10, and 40.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. But each person can choose their own success formula, and then they look at the board. And the game also uses dice, so chance, there again,
sure.
Always. And you go around and you can go to college, or you can select different career paths. And there's a big path around the board, but then there's also smaller paths. And you can see that if you go to college and become a scientist, it's easier for you to go to the moon. And when you go to the moon, you get lots of fame.
Okay.
Well, recently I was playing the game and I decided that I would have some money, some happiness, but I was going to choose lots of fame. So I decided, okay, I'll go to college and then I can go to the moon. That'd be great. But the problem was that I went to the moon and lost my turn because my rocket exploded. And when you lose your turn, you lose opportunity to be making money and collecting your happiness and fame and all of that along the way.
So your fame turned into infamy.
How did you end up trying to get your fame?
Went around the board a few times. It turns out I got plenty of money and I was doing well on my happiness, but I was lacking fame, the one thing I was really going after.
You needed that to win.
Oh, I absolutely did. So I went down another path. And what happened is I landed on a space that I was in a scandal. I got lots of fame.
The wrong type of thing.
Well, it doesn't really matter in the game. They don't care
Okay.
what kind of fame you get. But in the process, I lost all my happiness. And I needed happiness in order to win. So there I was as the player. I lost all my happiness. But I'm also seeing these other players. They are about to win. So now I'm really feeling unhappy.
So in real life, nobody or nothing can make your happiness go away. That's
You
a
think-
choice that we have about ourselves. And, money can disappear, our, quote, fame can turn to infamy, or it can be disappeared or marred. But our happiness depends on what we do. And it's really interesting because the word that we get wealth from in the Old English was weal, W-E-A-L. And that word used to mean happiness and prosperity. And so when we're pursuing life to get wealthier, we have to remember that our happiness needs to be foremost. Because if we go after money or we go after fame, those things can disappear out of our control. But our happiness is completely what we do and how we take life. And this is so true if we look at people like Corrie ten Boom that survived the Nazi Holocaust and was in a concentration camp. She never lost her happiness. She was able to push through all that primarily because of her joy. And that's a real life lesson that careers can teach people.
I could have chosen my success formula as 58 happinesses, one money and one fame. But that doesn't guarantee you'll win either, because then you're going to be chasing around seeking happiness, and I may not meet my formula before the others get their formula. So it's really a race, and it's a fun game to play, but there's also some interesting lessons that you can conclude along the way.
A lot of people that are successful in business and financially in the world, they like to give advice to young people about what to do to achieve that. And one of the common ways is that they encourage them to seek after knowledge before just seeking after money, because the knowledge will lead to money if you get it. And the Bible gives us a formula that's even more specific and useful than that. In 2 Peter, he talks about you start with your faith. You add to your faith virtue, and to your virtue knowledge. And that's something that you don't get. You don't get that perspective with a lot of the advice that is given today in the financial and the business world. But that's a real life lesson that you can take. And, playing the game of careers where you have your money, your fame, your happiness, it's a fun way to think about it. Sometimes you're going to win, sometimes you're going to lose. There is always an element of luck with the dice involved. Life is a little bit, there is an element that's beyond our control. Some people call it luck. Other people say, well, luck is what happens when opportunity meets preparedness. But what is the advantage to playing these board games? It's all about training our thinking to help as we play the game of life, the real game of life. So what are the lessons that we can pull from these board games that really help us in life? Those are the questions we want to be asking, what we want to be thinking as we're playing them, if we're going to pull life lessons from them.
So at the end of our careers game, there were 4 of us playing. I think you can have 6 players. One person won, but then we also showed our formulas and explained our struggles around the board. Oh, I was trying to get here, but then this happened to me. And someone else said, but I was so close. Look at this. And then someone realized, oh, wow, when you had that scandal, that really set you back. Yes, it did. Anyway, we kind of made some evaluations. We didn't just get up from the board and be done with it. And one of the reflections that we talked about was college. 2 of the 4 players, I was one of them, went to college right away in the game.
Okay.
The other two immediately sought after careers and started getting to where they could do some special ventures. Well, the two of us that went to college, we saw right away we would get more money for our paydays if we went to college, and it would help us achieve some of the opportunities. However, throughout the game, the two who didn't go to college were closest to their success formulas than the two that went to college. And the one who actually won, he went to college later in the game because there's no limits. You don't have to just go to college at the beginning. So he went to college later in the game, and then he ended up winning. But he wasn't, the person who didn't go to college at all wasn't far behind him. It's interesting. It doesn't always turn out that way, but these kind of games, how they work out, can lead to some great conversations around the table with your friends or family members.
And one thing to remember about any game is that in a board game or a card game, there is a winner and there are losers. In life, there can be a lot of winners. You can choose never to be a loser in real life. Whereas in a board game, it's, again, oftentimes the luck of the dice.
One of the decisions that people make as they go through the real game of life is whether they're going to use the infinite banking concept or not. The infinite banking concept gives people more control over their money while they're saving it for the future so that they're not leaving opportunities on the table that they could have along the way. And one of the ways that this becomes evident, somebody that has money in a 401k, they're going to have certain opportunities that are off the table for them.
Because their money is locked up.
Their money is locked up for most of their life until age 59 and a half. But people that don't want to take responsibility for their money, maybe that's a good option for them. They're getting some free money from the employer. They're not really going to do anything if they did have control of the money. So why not put it in the 401k? But that's going to be a choice that people face as they are going through the real game of life. What are they going to do about the infinite banking concept? Not everybody comes across that choice, but many do, and it can provide huge opportunities if you choose that path.
In life, people will say, well, that guy is successful or that woman is successful because their parents had lots of money and started them off on the right road. I didn't have that opportunity. I didn't get that education. My culture doesn't allow us to teach these things in our culture. I didn't learn this because, of some excuse that they're making. So next week, we're going to talk about a question that we want you to think about this week. What if you knew in 5 years you were going to come in to $1 million?
What would you think? How would you respond? What would you do differently today?
Come back next week when we discuss Dave Ramsey's response to a caller on this very subject right here on Wealth Talk.